Hi guys, another frame to look at, and it's another Hyperlow, and this is the Hyperlow Vert Freestyle. When I reviewed the Hyperlow CG, which I loved and I still love, I've just flown it today, which has been the first day we've had without any wind and even untuned. It's absolutely smooth as and flies absolutely brilliantly. But when I reviewed that frame, I let Richard know that the review was up, etc. And he was really chuffed with the review. He thought that I'd understood the frame and the ideas behind it really well. So at the time he said, when you're ready for another build, give me a shout and I'll send you another frame. And on the back of this, because I like the frame so much and I like my Hyperlow modular so much, which is currently on its way to America actually, because I've given it to one of my subscribers, the frame, because he's a guy who absolutely loves the modular frame. And now I've moved on to the CG, I don't want it to sit gathering dust. But anyway, Richard kind of said that he was going to go all out in terms of marketing, because last year he really just focused on making sure the frames were good, and obviously packaging them up and sending them out, etc. Whereas this year he was hoping to increase his brand awareness. So I sent him an email and said, you know, I love the frames, do you want me to contact a few people in the UK to see if they will stock them, and I can ask them the question, and if they're interested, send you their details. And he said yes. So I contacted Unmantech, who I use quite a bit, and said, you know, here's my review of this frame. You know, I've run its predecessor for 6 months without any issue. I really like these frames. I think, you know, you should consider stocking them. And they were really amenable. So I passed Alex's details on to Richard, and then that was kind of that. And then I was speaking to Alex about something else a week or two later, and I mentioned Hyperlow, and he said the frames are due in a couple of days, and if you want one, I'll send you one for, you know, a huge discount as a thank you for introducing us to Richard in the first place, which is where this came from. So huge thanks to Unmantech for sending me this frame. As I said, it's cost me very little at all, you know, passing the details on, Richard's details, etc. So huge shout out to them. We've got 3 battery straps, which is really nice. My Hyperlow CG was sent out just before Richard got his battery straps in, so mine didn't have battery straps. So we've got, what have we got here? We've got micro cam mounts and antenna tube mounts. We've got some Dayglow pink antenna tubes, which I kind of like actually. We've got hardware, and again we've got 10 and 15mm standoffs. Got a little battery pad. We've got the battery plate. Got a top plate and a bottom plate. The carbon looks the same as my Hyperlow modular. It's pretty standard carbon, really good quality, but it doesn't have that lovely satin finish that the CG did. We've still got press nuts. It's still cut really well. It isn't chamfered, so just looking at this, I'll probably just take a file and soften some of these edges, as sharp edges and concrete or grass don't generally go together. But there's nothing at all wrong with that. It just doesn't have that top finish that the CG had, which was ever so lovely in your hands, but still really good carbon. The interesting part about this frame, if I just tip the rest of this out, we've got another GoPro mount, but the interesting part about this frame is the arms. If I just set this aside, we've got another bumper as well. The arms, as you can see, are very slender, and they come in 2 parts, and essentially this idea came about via Kebab FPV, who's the designer of the Hyperlight frames. And when he was testing this sort of vertical arm theory. He had a lot of vibration in the arms, and his idea was to use two separate arms and essentially to bolt them together, and this is where this idea came from. So what you essentially have is two 5mm arms which sit together and are bolted at the end, and obviously two bolts in between. So you've got a hell of a huge wedge of arm, but it's very, very slender, and the idea of this is obviously less drag when you're going through the air. So it's going to be a really interesting frame to put together this, and a really interesting frame to fly. Quite an unusual frame, and certainly not for everybody. The CG is your kind of bread and butter freestyle frame from Hyperlow, and it's the frame that I'd recommend to anybody who's certainly relatively new to the hobby, or someone who just wants a standard really good quality frame. This is for, I suppose, people who want something a little bit more unusual and like trying out new things, which is exactly what got me interested in it in the first place. So what I'll do is I'll put all this together, and then we'll have a look and see what we've got. So there she is. So I've put the frame together by the bits that you see to the right hand side. The bits to the left are basically the hardware and bits and bobs if you want to build this in a 15mm configuration. So what you see below you is essentially the big brother of the Vert race frame. People kept asking Richard to make a frame that had vertical arms that carried a GoPro, so this is what we've essentially got. Now, because it's a mid-mount frame, you're going to get props in view with your GoPro. So rather than going for a standard X or a squashed X, he's gone full out race profile stretched X. So basically the idea of this is you're going to be flying pretty fast, nose down, and the thin arms will obviously create less wind resistance. And as you can see, the arms themselves create basically the stack itself, so 10mm. You've got a 2mm bottom plate with press nuts. You've got a 2mm top plate. You've got the action cam couch, which is the same as the one on the CG and works really well. And you've got this battery plate. But as I said, the unique part of it is the arms, which are essentially two parts. As I said, you've got the top normal arm, and then you've got another sort of brace arm at the bottom, which is attached via a bolt, and then an M2 lock nut or M3 lock nut on the bottom. And the frame itself, when it's put together, feels really, really rigid, and this one isn't even bolted together. So the idea behind this is this frame is really for those sort of people who like freestyle but like to fly pretty fast, aggressive pilots, not for the person who likes to potter around doing sort of floaty stuff, but the person who likes to get the nose down and do pretty aggressive flying. And when the quad is in that orientation, obviously it's got a very slender profile, and because he's using this top battery plate rather than having a wider body, you get less wind resistance when you're nose down going through the air. What this top plate actually does is a number of things. One, it keeps the body itself slender. Two, it allows you to basically use a 10mm stack without having to mess around with battery straps, and it also allows you to mount your battery in a number of different ways. So if I get the battery strap, so you can run your battery strap as normal, like so, but you can also run it sort of toilet tank style via that, or like so, and run your battery sort of lengthways, which is becoming popular with racers, hence the slot there. So overall, I really like it. It's not a frame for everybody, and essentially, like a lot of these mid-mounts, you'll build your stack kind of upside down. So you use this battery plate and then the bolts going down, and you would hang your flight controller from the top plate and ESC from the top plate, etc. Obviously the bits I haven't put on are the 3D printed antenna mounts, and you get two of these, one which basically allows them to stick up like so, and the other which allows them to go out to the side. And when you're building it, I wouldn't go with the upwards ones because they tend to get sort of knocked around more. I prefer mine to come out of the side. We've got little 3D printed micro cam, and this frame is obviously built for a Runcam Micro or a Foxy micro camera. It's kind of a really unusual frame, but I really like it. Everything feels really strong and well put together. Obviously you get these bits as well. Oh, that'll go on the underside, and you also get a spare arm in the kit. And the bit I also like is if you build it with in a 15mm stack version, you get these little spacers, which if you're a long time subscriber of the channel, you know that some time ago I really liked an RGX frame which used a similar concept. And what it allows you to do is if you run a 15mm stack height, you will use these spacers to obviously lift up the top plate, and then you will use the longer standoffs, the 15mm standoffs in replacement of the 10mm ones here. But because you're using these spacers, what you can do is stagger the arms. So if you look at something like the America frame or frames like that, you can sit the rear arms higher up and have the spacer below the arms, and at the front have the spacer above the arms. And by lifting the rear arms up, you will potentially get less prop wash. So yeah, not a huge amount to say about the frame. I think like all Hyperlow frames I've had, it feels extremely well designed. I really like the arm design. I wasn't sure I would do, but when you actually put them on, they feel immensely solid. And because you've got 10mm sort of sandwiched together there, I wouldn't imagine they would break very easily. They feel super stiff, and Hyperlow carbon is really good. I dropped my CG frame from about 80 feet onto concrete the other day when my TBS Unify cut out, and I lost video signal. And other than a minor chip on the front arm and a smashed GoPro lens, the frame itself was absolutely fine. So the quality is really there. I think my opinion on this is, if you want a Hyperlow frame, if you want an all-round everyday frame, a standard freestyle frame, I'd probably say go for the CG, which is a little bit bigger, has a little bit more room, has the kind of nice mounting system inside, whereas this is really, I think, a little bit more advanced, and this is kind of more for your more experienced pilots who really likes to sort of fly fast and aggressively. And I think for a pilot like that, this is a pretty rare frame. The gist of these sort of vertical arm frames is that they corner and are much quicker in a straight line because you have less drag. The downside is if you're flying in really windy conditions, you can get buffeted because there's obviously a lot thicker profile to the arms. So if you get a side wind hitting you, you can get blown off course a little bit more than you would do with a standard frame. So as always, there are pros and cons, but if you're looking out for a sort of really interesting, unusual frame and you like to tinker like I do, I'm really looking forward to putting this together. In terms of components, you could use very small ESCs and mount them on the side of the arms, but really this frame is begging for an all-in-one flight controller and ESC really. And I've got a couple lying around which I'm hoping will fit. What have I got? So I've got the Nox 2.17, and I suspect this is going to be too fat to go in. Let's have a look. Ooh, it just fits, and I'm going to have to be really clever in terms of mounting it, but that might be an option that is possibly pushing it. The other option, if I can find it, which it doesn't look like I can, is the no, I don't know where it is the Lumineer Alpha or Sunrise Siskin, whichever branch you have. which will fit in this, and also you've got things like the Asgard as well, which will fit in as well. And I think they're the types of sort of all-in-one ESC and flight controller this is really designed for. I mean, as I said, you can build it in other ways, but if you're going to go to the effort of having such pretty slim arms, it seems a shame to sort of stick big ESCs on the side and ruin the look. So yeah, so when I've got time, I'll put this together, do a build video on it. The build itself, I think, is really going to be pretty straightforward. There's nothing particularly unusual here. It's just very tight if you run a 10mm stack. I was planning to run this with a 10mm stack, but having seen the spacers, I kind of like the idea of having the rear arms higher as well. So I'm going to have a sort of think and look at the components that I've got and see what works best for me, and then I'll put the build video up. But yeah, huge shout out to Unmanned Tech, huge shout out to Rich at Hyperlow Frames, who continues to blow me away with his frame designs. Yeah, if you're interested in this, look at Hyperlow Frames or Unmanned Tech in the UK. But as I said, I think this is more of a specialist frame for an experienced pilot who knows what he's doing. If you're looking for a more general frame, then I think the Hyperlow CG, which I'm flying at the moment, is an absolute fantastic frame and remains my favourite freestyle frame so far. This, I'm just dying to see how it flies, and if it performs as I think it will do, then it'll be a pretty spectacular frame. So yeah, cheers guys, thanks again, cheers, bye bye.